Hey there, fellow cinephiles. Ready to take a deep dive with us? Today, we're going to plunge into a franchise that, well, let's face it, made a lot of us afraid to go in the water for a while. Yep, we're talking JAWS. We've got some incredible excerpts from a source that covers the whole thing, from Peter Benchley's book all the way through to, well, all the sequels. We're talking the good, the bad, and the interesting. We'll be unpacking the filmmaking, the cultural impact, and even how a story about a killer shark ended up making people want to protect sharks. Kind of ironic, huh? Speaking of the original Jaws, did you know the mechanical shark used for filming? They nicknamed him Bruce. And get this, Bruce was a bit of a diva, constantly breaking down on set. But Spielberg, he was like, okay, we'll work with this. He actually turned that whole mess into, well, pure genius. By not showing the shark all the time, he made it way scarier. What do you think about that?
It's a perfect example of how sometimes limits can actually make things better.
Yeah.
Spielberg, he knew that what we don't see can be way scarier than anything you could put on screen. He let our imaginations run wild. And let me tell you, that's a powerful thing.
It's like the scariest monster is the one we create in our own heads. Now we got to talk about the music, John Williams' score. Those two notes.
Yeah.
How do you think something so simple ended up being so iconic?
Well, it's amazing how music can, well, play with our emotions. Those two notes on that tuba, instant chills.
Yeah.
Even today, it's like instant dread.
It's a Pavlov's dog, right? We hear those notes and we're like, uh-oh, something bad's about to happen.
But Jaws wasn't all just scares. It had those moments of humor, the friendships, and even some, I don't know, deeper moments that made you think. Like, remember Quint's story about the USS Indianapolis chilling? How do you think that scene fit into the whole movie? Oh, it's brilliant. Using a story within the story to build the character. Quint, he seems so tough, but then you hear that story and you see a different side of them. Vulnerable. It makes you realize even the toughest guys, nature can still, mess with them.
Yeah, it's like it's saying we're all just tiny little humans in a big, scary world, right? And speaking of big and scary, we can't forget how Jaws changed the whole game for movies. It was the first real summer blockbuster, the kind that took over the world. What made it such a phenomenon, do you think?
Well, you had Spielberg at the top of his game. A story that grabbed you, characters you remembered, and man, that marketing campaign, genius. Don't go in the water. Pure genius.
I mean, who wasn't saying that back then? And then there's those lines, the ones everyone still quotes, you're going to need a bigger boat. Classic. But then, well, the sequels came along. Each one trying to catch that same magic. Jaws 2 came out in 78. Different vibe, though. More teenagers. More like those slasher movies that were getting popular. Did that work, you think? Or did it kind of, mess with the legacy of the first one?
That's a tough one. It rode that wave of success, sure, but it didn't have that same depth. It felt more, I don't know, like they were just following trends.
So, yeah, riding the wave, but not really diving deep. I see what you did there. But the sequels didn't stop there, did they? Nope. 1983 rolls around and we get Jaws 3D. As you might guess, they were jumping on that whole 3D craze. So how'd that experiment go?
Well, let's just say people remember the gimmick more than the actual movie.
Yeah.
The 3D was new then, sure, but it couldn't hide the fact that the story was weak. And those special effects, not so special.
Oh, I remember those cardboard 3D glasses. Technology's come a long way, hasn't it? But you're right, the story felt like an afterthought, like they were just chucking stuff at the audience instead of telling a good story.
Yeah, it's a good lesson, I guess.
Yeah.
Sometimes the best stories are the simple ones, just told really, really well.
Speaking of simple stories, well, Jaws wasn't done with us yet. Oh, no. They had one more, how do I put this, unique installment up their sleeve. Jaws. The Revenge, 1987. This time, the shark has a grudge against the Brody family. It can travel across oceans and, get this, roars like a car engine. So how did this one, with its, let's call it creative premise, add to the Jaws legacy?
Well, Jaws. The Revenge definitely solidified the whole sequels are never as good thing. It's like the poster child for how not to do a sequel. But it's become kind of a cult classic in a way. Like, so bad it's good. People watch it to laugh at it.
I get that. So bad it's good. I've heard that. That shark roar, though.
Yeah.
The plot. Come on. Okay, but let's get serious for a minute. Jaws, well, it wasn't exactly good PR for sharks, was it? I mean, entertaining, sure. But it also made people terrified of these creatures. What do you think about that whole impact on how people see sharks?
Oh, that's a big one. And it definitely had consequences, On the one hand, Jaws played into that fear of the unknown, made sharks seem like, I don't know, mindless killing machines. Yeah. After the movie, tons of people were out there fishing and hunting sharks, just trying to, wipe them out.
It's like the movie created a monster, but a real one this time, right?
Kinda, yeah. But there's another side to it. Jaws also made people curious about sharks. More research, more understanding of how they really are. And Peter Benchley, the guy who wrote the book, he actually became a huge advocate for protecting sharks. He even said he regretted how his book portrayed them.
That's interesting. You realize what he done makes you think a story, even a fictional one, it can really change things in the real world, right?
Absolutely. You got to think critically, separate the stories from the facts, you know?
So, Jaws' legacy for sharks is kind of a mixed bag. Fear, misunderstanding, but also, I guess, some good came out of it. Okay, enough with the serious stuff. Let's talk about why people still love Jaws so much. Even the sequels, with all their, well, issues. Why do you think these movies still grab people after all these years?
It's the perfect mix. That primal fear, the action, the characters, you know. Spielberg created this world that feels like both normal and terrifying at the same time.
Yeah, like 1 minute you're having a good time on the beach, next minute, bam, nightmare. We all know, logically, shark attacks are rare, but there's something about that fin, you know, cutting through the water.
It's a reminder that we're not always on top. Nature's powerful, and Jaws doesn't let us forget that.
So Jaws is like playing with our anxieties about, well, about just being human, fragile little humans.
Exactly. But also, let's be honest, it's just plain fun to watch. The suspense, the action, those lines everybody knows, even the sequels, they've got that cheesy charm, you know.
They're part of pop culture now, aren't they? Movies, TV, even commercials reference Jaws. But beyond the fun and the scares, there's something more, I think. This whole idea of a monster terrorizing people, it's a story that's been around forever, hasn't it?
You're right. Jaws is kind of like a modern version of that old story.
So it's not just a movie, it's a myth, I guess. A myth that taps into those fears we all have about the world, about what's out there.
Yeah, and that's why it works. It connects with us on a level, like, deeper than just entertainment.
It's like even a big blockbuster, something everyone goes to see for fun, can still make you think. But there's also that nostalgia factor, right? Jaws takes us back to a different time in movies. Back when they used practical effects, when it was all about the suspense, that slow build.
Absolutely. Back when filmmakers weren't afraid to let you, the audience, fill in the blanks, you know?
I feel like a lot of horror movies today, they just rely on jump scares and, well, gore. Not enough of that slow burn, that psychological stuff.
Good point. Jaws reminds us that the scariest stuff is often the stuff we don't see.
So it's not just nostalgia. It's a masterclass in how to do suspense right. A film that still works because it understands how to get under your skin, how to make you use your imagination. Okay, one last thing before we finish this deep dive into Jaws. The Brody family. Every movie, it's a different Brody dealing with, well, the aftermath of that first shark attack. What do you make of that? Is it just an easy plot device, or is there something more to it?
I think it adds a whole other level to the story, you know? You've got Chief Brody, the dad, facing that shark in the first one, becoming a hero. Then his sons, Michael and Sean, they each have their own encounters in the sequels. Each one dealing with their own fears and, I guess, the legacy of what their dad went through.
Like a Greek tragedy, only with sharks instead of, you know, gods and monsters.
Exactly. It adds that psychological element, like that first encounter with the shark. It keeps affecting them, even years later.
It's like they're carrying the weight of that attack, trying to protect everyone from this force of nature that just won't quit.
And it shows how trauma, well, it can cycle through families, you know, affecting how they see the world, how they live their lives.
It's a reminder that even a movie about a shark can make you think about some pretty deep stuff. But beyond the Brody family, there's something even bigger at play in Jaws, don't you think? Our relationship with nature, that mix of wonder and terror.
You nailed it. We love the ocean, its beauty, its mystery, but we also know it can be powerful, dangerous.
Yeah, Jaws shows that, like, perfectly.
It's a message that's more relevant now than ever, right? With climate change, all the environmental stuff going on.
Yeah, it's like a warning, you know? Ignore nature at your own risk.
Exactly. Jaws is a reminder that we mess with the balance of nature at our peril.
Well, we certainly covered a lot of ground today. The filmmaking, the impact, the sequels, the whole shark thing, the myths, even the psychology of it all. But before we wrap things up, I want to hear from you, our listeners. We've explored the depth, so to speak, of Jaws, from Spielberg's genius behind the camera to, well, the whole cultural impact, the sequels, the everything. But we want to know, what about you? What parts of this franchise have really stuck with you? What do you keep coming back to?
Maybe it's the way Jaws it grabs you, It's a simple story, but it gets under your skin and makes you think, even all these years later.
Yeah, it's like, who knew a movie about a shark could be so, so deep? So, as we come up for air from this deep dive, tell us, what makes Jaws special for you? Is it the suspense, the music, something else entirely? Let us know. Leave a comment, share your favorite Jaws moments, and hey, maybe we'll dive even deeper into the whole thing next time.
Because like a good story, Jaws keeps us thinking, asking questions, even after it's over, right? It's like it throws you back in the water every time.
And there you have it. We've gone from page to screen, through sequels, and, well, explored the whole Jaws phenomenon.
From those iconic moments, the score, the lines, to, well, the bigger questions it makes us ask.
About our fears, about nature.
About storytelling itself.
So why do you think Jaws still has such a bite? Is it the primal fear, those unforgettable characters?
No.
Or maybe it's Spielberg's magic behind the camera?
Something to think about, isn't it?
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. If you want to explore more, check out the sources we used. All the info will be in the show notes. Until next time, happy watching.